What's up guys, Ben here bringing you another video today. We are doing part 2 of our Major 3 video. We covered like the top 6 teams. We're going to finish up with the rest of the winners bracket teams in LAG and Toronto, and then talk about the bottom 4 squads and talk about all their chances, where they're excelling, where they're struggling. So let's dive in on these 6 teams and see how they got here. All right, so as promised, let's talk about Toronto. During the Major 3 qualifier cycle, they played Boston, Vegas, Optic, New York, and London, and did a pretty good job against the squads. They actually started off against Boston going down 1-3, and I also need to back up as well, like context. You know, they had come off the back of 2 3-0s all in one day, so at the Major, that kind of dumped them out of the contest. So you combo that with the Boston loss, and they decided to make a change, benching Sandy and bringing in Hixie, and then after they did that, they went on a little bit of a run, beating Vegas, beating Optic, beating New York, surprisingly losing to London. Didn't really see that one coming, but either way, a solid 3-2 for Toronto, and not a amazingly easy schedule. And there's a lot to like, there's a lot to dislike, so let's dive in. I think contextually, when we talk about this team, the biggest thing, as always, is the difference with this team from online to LAN. I'm not calling them onliners. I hate that label, but of note here, you know, they have been money online pretty much all season. In fact, they only lost control twice online, which is crazy. But on LAN, they haven't actually done that. And they've had a lot of good series, and then they get later on the tournaments and they've had a lot of clunkers. So I don't know if that's, you know, a little bit on some weird chemistry issues. And that's why they brought in Hixie, but just something of context. Now, taking a look at their stats from this Major 3 cycle, really like the respawn numbers, combined 10 and 13 in those game modes. Hotel's still a bread and butter for them in both Control and in Hardpoint. They play pretty much every Hardpoint map except for Embassy. Control, same thing. They lost to Fortress, but it's a Mickey map. Where I'm a little concerned with this team is they've not been a dominant or a fantastic search team all season. And they've especially struggled at times on this game mode at LAN. And there are a couple of things I think to talk about when we kind of pinpoint maybe some of their search issues. They have one of the more lower first blood win percentages in the league, so they're not doing a great job of starting 4v3, but when they do win them, they're winning them at like 80%. So that's pretty solid. Just need to try and find maybe a couple more first bloods. To kind of dive in more on their search, because they're around 500, I think there's a couple of avenues where I think we can pinpoint their struggles, right? Just taking a look at overall kind of S&D stats. They're at 46.32% in first blood win percentage, right? So the percentage of rounds where they are getting a first blood in a round is actually near the bottom of the league. I think actually, if I do the math here, they're second lowest, so that's not particularly good. But when they are getting first bloods, they are winning those rounds at a good clip. League average around 72%. They are at 78 and change if I round up. So that's pretty good. If we take a look at like offense splits, again, first blood win percentage lower than the league average of 45. They're at 41. And at defense, only winning 50%, league average 54. So just something of note. That I think maybe if they can improve their first bloods, they'll get a couple of more S&D rounds and maybe win a couple of more maps. So that could be a potential area of improvement for them when they get to LAN. Now let's take a look at their overall stats and kind of wrap this up with Toronto. Hixie coming in hasn't been the best of Slayers, just like Dangosi, still trying to feel his way in this team, averaging a 0.87 in Hardpoint, 0.67 in Search, not that great. Compared to Eli's 0.86 on the one map that he did play during the stage, and a 0.8 in Control. So want to see Hixie again, maybe like Danny's trying to do a little bit too much, play a little bit too slow, trying to kind of fit in with the team system. Want to see him maybe play a little bit more selfish, try and play a little bit more for himself and get a few more kills. That might help him kind of get in the flow and less in the blender. I do think something we should start talking about when it comes to Toronto as well is I like Inside as a player. I do think in Respawn that he can be a little bit slower. These engagement numbers, 37.4 compared to his other teams in the 40s in Hardpoint, is definitely on the lower side for ARs when they're the lowest for many ARs in the league. And then we scroll over to engagements on Control. It's at 27. Now, I just want to say with the Control number, to be clear, they play a lot of Hotel Control, like a lot. Like during this split, they have played Hotel Control twice. And so I just want to note, and as CeeLo as well as a similar issue, if you're kind of the main AR that's always kind of holding the off lane or sort of away from the action, like if you're just kind of pushing out the sort of AR that's going to push out plat or hold plat, like on defense on Hotel, like you're not going to have high engagement numbers. So I think contextually, this one kind of makes sense, although I will say sometimes he's definitely way out of play in Control. The Hardpoint one to me is a little bit of an issue. Would like to see him getting more active in hardpoint. So we'll see if Jamie speeds up at land, but based on recent memory, I don't think that's going to be the case. So that's the Toronto Ultra breakdown. They are going to play in the first round of this bracket against New York Subliners, and that should be interesting. I probably have New York favored, but we'll do a bracket predictions video tomorrow. If they do get past that, they will play Boston Optic in the next round. If they do lose this series, they'll play Florida, who I think they can beat. So for me, for Toronto, they're another team that's sitting kind of on the top. I would say coming into this event, I feel like they're sitting on the top 8, top 6 bubble. Just like Boston, they have the talent to get to Sundays. They have the talent to win events. But to be safe, they're also, we haven't seen yet those teams make a super deep run in this tournament. So until then, I'm going to reserve saying that I predict them to get top 4. I haven't done a bracket prediction yet, so I could be completely wrong once I actually do the numbers out. But just based on sort of how we've seen Thieves play this year on land, FaZe, Optic at home, team like Seattle, I think Toronto may just fall just outside that top 4 right now. All right, let's finish up our winner bracket teams with a team that I don't think anyone expected to be in this conversation, and that is the Los Angeles Guerrillas, who backed in to the 8th and final spot by 2 victories last week, both in game 5s, one against Florida and one against the Vegas region. Actually, they beat Vegas in 4 maps, so I take that back. But coming in, they looked like a dead team, and they were 0-3 going into this weekend, and they managed to win 2 and back in the bracket. Speaks to the craziness of the format and the 5 games and all that stuff, but they look chalked, dealing with all the external stuff going on in the org. They weren't in that great form during the Major 2 cycle. They had lost to Toronto, beat LAG, lost to Boston, so like they got top by 8 at Major 2. But them seeking the winners is a huge victory for them, and it gives them an opportunity to get points, and right now they're sitting outside the top 8 cut line. Obviously, Minnesota's sitting at 8th, and we'll get to them in a second. So let's dive in more in the team and player stats and kind of break down what they're doing well and what they're struggling. I would say for what's good, they have turned around their S&D struggles and their control struggles a bit from the last split. They were not particularly good at S&D when this team first formed. I think they finished like 4-7 is what it says here. The left side, and 2-6 in control was ugly. So far they are 5-3 in search and 3-2 in control. The downside is that's come at the expense of their hardpoint game, which is completely fallen off the cliff. Only 2 wins and 8 losses. They have a goose egg on a hotel, goose egg on a hydro, goose egg on Mercado. Their map pool right now is very, very, very narrow. I think everybody's kind of realized that Embassy is sort of their best map. No one wants to play them on that. It has opened up forces to sneak in these series, but you know, they need to find another bread and butter hardpoint map to keep people honest about that Embassy veto. Although some teams have squared up with them in Embassy during this split. But taking a look at their overall stats, I mean, even with that sort of mixy hardpoint record, they are slaying in hardpoint, so it doesn't seem like they're really utilizing their kills very well. Alec a little bit slow compared to the others in engagement, but he had a couple of really slow maps. I think he stepped it up last weekend. Hill time, surprisingly, Alec, the least amount of hill time on the team. That's sort of off from what we see normal ARs in the league, usually hill soaking for their team. So they have their subs pushing out. So that's an interesting kind of tweak compared to other teams in their system. Alec has struggled in search and in control. So Alec's definitely the X factor on the team right now outside this 1.1 in hardpoint, which is pretty good. I would say right now for me on paper, maybe Exceed is kind of playing the best on the team. 104 in hardpoint, 114 in search, 0.93 in control. But really both subs have started to kind of round into form. And I think people weren't sure about these sub players, but I think they both definitely can play at this level, which is nice to see. I didn't even notice, by the way, that Adam Assault has a 1.32 in control. That's actually pretty typical in a 1-2 in search. So Ix's son, aka Adam Assault, doing well. What do I think of LAG? Unfortunately for them, they getting the 8 seed mean that they have to play the number 1 seed in the beginning bracket, which is Seattle. And I'm going to be honest, with their hardpoint struggles, I don't really see it against Seattle. I think this is like a 3-1 at best. And then LAG will get dumped then into losers and have to play Vegas first round, which they just beat them. So you never know about the rematch. And then from there, they're going to play in Minnesota. So this LAG team actually might back into a top 6 in this tournament or a top 8. But I think either way, for them getting 10 or 20 additional CDL points is big. Them getting close to that 100 CDL point number is going to be really key. Getting into the last 2 events where they're probably going to have to keep this form up, get into champs. But really good work from LAG this weekend. Job is not done. We'll see if they can get a placing other than dead last at this tournament. I feel good about the top 8. The top 6 is, I think, where their ceiling kind of caps out, but curious to see how LAG do on land. Like if they go to land and have a stinker, whiplash for this team, but we'll see what happens. All right, let's talk about their potential losers round one opponent if they lose to Seattle, which is going to be the Vegas Legion. And a heartbreaker for this team. They were so close to making winners bracket and then ran up against LAG. At the end, lost to them. FaZe didn't do them any favors by losing to Optic. That would have got them in. And so they are sitting on the outside right now looking in the losers bracket. But I will say for Vegas, they obviously benched ProLoot and released him and picked up TwoReal, and they looked serviceable during the split. Victories against ROKKR and Thieves are great. They had a tough one against FaZe, winning first map and just getting kind of ran after that. And losing to Toronto, and the only win in that series was a a round 11 game 2 on CeeLo. So let's dive in a little bit more on the team stats. I think, okay, so one thing to like is the S&D still looks good. They're going to need that if they want to make deep runs in tournaments. But, this team is clearly shown that they're probably one of the worst control teams in the game. 1-4 again in this split. If we take a look at overall control stats, only the London Royal Ravens are worse than them. And that's by a couple of percentage points. So for Vegas, the swing mode not going their way, and you can't win controls and you're trying to win off of 2 searches, you need to find a hardpoint, which they've been not too bad. And I think for the benefit here of hardpoint, like they're playing all the maps, not playing Fortress, which is okay. So some interesting things to think about with the Vegas, but the control is the real focus point here. They need to improve this game mode. They looked really good after that first series. It looked like them coming in with TwoReal. They won that first hotel control. It's like, okay, we've turned the corner in this game mode, and I think they've lost 4 straight since then. So not ideal. They need to improve there. But yeah, with control, like 1-4 is not going to cut it. It's a swing mode. They've only won 1. Need to get a few more on the board. Otherwise, you're just going to be heavily reliant on the double search and a respawn combo. So let's take a look at some player stats and then kind of wrap up with thoughts on the team. So I think the first thing to focus on when we take a look at these numbers, TwoReal has been good in control, not so good in the other game modes. 0.74 in search is no bueno, and a 0.89 in hardpoint is not good either. So need to see him provide a little bit more power at the sub level, especially with TJ also continuing to struggle in respawn game modes with a 0.9 in hardpoint, a 0.72 in control. But on the flip side, why they're continuing to be really good in search is Clayster having a actually pretty good split in S&D. A 147 across 6 maps is excellent. TJ still continuing to be one of the best players in search with that 1.11. I will say, interestingly enough, only 6 first bloods and 13 deaths. So something to think about there. He is kind of dying a lot early on in the rounds for them. So I think my overall takeaway for Vegas is they're a serviceable team. It's going to really depend on the draw, and it's really going to depend on if their teamwork is working on a given day. Like I can see this team having that drop down from the first series, which is going to be LAG, and just losing them again and getting dead last. Or I can see them beating LAG and then, you have to play either Atlanta FaZe, Vegas, Atlanta FaZe, LA Thieves, or ROKKR in the next round. So I don't know. I'm going to say for Vegas, I think they're probably getting top 8 or dead last this one. Just another tough draw, and just came up short in the qualifiers and didn't really give themselves a great avenue to this event. But the Cinderella run, I guess you never really know with the squad. I just don't really see it. All right, let's talk about the team that's probably in the worst form of every squad in the CDL right now. And that is the Minnesota ROKKR. They looked so good in the Major 2 cycle. Coming up just short in losers finals. And then they went home and they've been getting Kentucky fried, as Temp says. This stage going 0-5, losing to New York in a heartbreaker, getting smoked by Seattle, smoked by Optic, losing a tough game 5 to Vegas, and then getting smoked by Thieves. There's just nothing good here for ROKKR. Only winning 4 maps out of 5 series is just not going to cut it. There's too much talent in this team for them to just be this poor. They've looked pretty, I would say the game mode they've looked the worst in. If I want to highlight these, look at these S&D numbers, man. 1 round in S&D Mercado against New York. 1 round in S&D Hotel against Seattle. 1 round in S&D CeeLo against Optic. They did go to a map 10 against Vegas on Mercado, but another 1-6 on Fortress S&D and 3-6 against LA Thieves on Hotel. So as we start to take a look at the game modes here, it is really ugly with this team in S&D right now. I just don't understand how this squad is this bad in search. It just doesn't make any sense to me. It's almost as if they just need to throw out the playbook, and whatever they've been doing in search has just not been working overall. If you're just getting 1 round, it's just insane. But the hard point hasn't been that bad. I mean, 3 and 4 is nothing to sneeze at. The 1 and 4 in control, though, in the swing mode with 3 losses on Fortress is interesting. And I don't quite understand it because they were so good at the CeeLo last stage. They were so good at the CeeLo in Major 1, and now they're not playing it. So I don't quite understand what is going on with this team. They're a massive enigma, and the team that's, I think, most under pressure right now. A bad performance in this major could mean a roster change. I mean, if we take a look at the sort of individual stats here, I mean, it's also very ugly. I mean, the search numbers are, man. We don't even need to talk about the 5.8 and the 5.7 here from Cam and Mance. Cammy actually, for all of the sort of pressure that he's been under last major, doing pretty good in the respawns with 1 KDs, but Afro's having a really tough stage with these numbers. Around a 1 in hard point, a 0.8 in S&D, and a 0.86 in control is sort of not at the level we've seen from him before. Dylan's playing good in the respawns, but Dylan always plays good stats-wise, but Search really struggling. So I don't know what to say about this team, man. I expect them to honestly go to this event and get dead last. Like, there's just nothing to like, and I do think they're going to need to make a decision about a roster change, but I mean, are you just going to drop Ben and, you know, up by looking at the stats and sort of his inconsistent performances after the last stage, you're just going to toss him on the pen? Like, I don't really know what the right decisions are here. And I also wouldn't be completely surprised if they maybe rotate Ben out for one of their challenger subs before this event. I think, I wouldn't say that it's likely, but if it happens, I won't be surprised if they try to find something for this team. And the reason for that is they've slipped from 6th to 8th now in the overall CDL points on the season. They're going to lose ground if they get 0 points. Potentially one of those teams in the bottom 4 between like Vegas, Florida, LAG, and London. Some of them or a bunch of them could get points up on them. And suddenly that like 40 point lead they have could be like 10. So a lot to work on here for ROKKR. Expect them to get smoked by Thieves or FaZe coming down from winners, and for them to get dead last and totally rethink things going into the next major. All right, next up, we're going to talk about Florida, and they played FaZe in New York to start things off with their new roster, right? They basically essentially squad wiped and start off 0-6 map count, but they did play FaZe in New York, and they followed up with a good win against Boston, but losses to Seattle and a game 5 loss to LAG meant that they were not going to make it to winners with a 1-4 record. All right, so here's like the good and the bad with this team. The good is they seem to have stabilized things to an extent in respawn. 2 or 3 control, 3 and 5 hardpoint is not amazing, but not bad. But the 1 and 5 in search, their search completely falling off a cliff after the roster changes is not great, considering, again, just like with Vegas, you know, when you're one of these teams that like aren't going to be hardpoint or in control stars, one of these top teams, you got to be able to clutch in your game 5s, your game 2s to really take advantage of those sort of game modes where you can find an overall advantage in compared to the field. And right now they've slipped from being a dominant S&D team to probably one of the worst now. So that's not great for Florida. Let's dive in on the individual stats and see how they're doing. All right, so taking a look at the individual stats for Florida, again, hardpoint looks solid across the board. This is a marked improvement for the last team that was just, they were the worst hardpoint team by a mile. But the search numbers are ugly. Havoc, who is a dominant search player, is having a tough one with the 0.78 right now. Struggling with the first blood, first death split as well. So need to see their like 1v1 star, S&D star really turned around, but it's not like he's getting a lot of help from the other guys. Brack is a 1.15 as an AR, which is good. Control numbers not too bad, but overall slaying is not particularly good in that game mode outside of Havoc, surprisingly. And I like what you get from Capsule at times, but need to see him kind of step up on this team. I think the way this team is built, it's right there for the taking for him to be the all-star player in this team. And right now through this first split, he's not taking advantage of that. I mean, I think that you have kind of a long runway with him on that front. I think they're going to give him all season, but there's a big opportunity and he needs to take advantage of that. And, you know, show us what we see sometimes from him, just his massive ability to slay out. So yeah, for Florida, they are going to be facing whoever comes from the bottom side of winners bracket, which is going to be either Toronto or New York. And I don't favor them to be either of those teams. So unfortunately for Florida, I think they're going to get dead last at this major and really need to step it up in major 4 and 5 if they want to make it for champs, because they're going to be way behind the cut line 8 ball points wise in the CDL. All right, so our final team that we're going to preview is the London Royal Ravens, and actually we'll give them credit For this major qualifying cycle, they did go 2-3. They beat LG and Toronto, but because of map count and a few other tie-breaking factors, it was not enough to sneak into the 8th spot. With losses against Boston in Game 5, Seattle in Game 4, and Game 3 owed by FaZe. So an improvement from London from the last split in which they were completely uncompetitive. They had 2 victories, and let's take a look at the team stats. So in general, this season, this team has been really bad in controls. As we saw earlier on, we were talking about control. Like London is the worst team in the league. Close to Vegas, but they're bad. And they haven't gotten any better during this split, going 1-4 with their only win is on a Fortress. So for the other non-Mickey maps, Hotel and Asilo, they're 0-4. Like that's not ideal. If you're not getting veto advantage, you're not going to play Fortress likely. So it's not a game mode that they can rely on. But weirdly enough, like 4-4 in S&D, 4-4 in Hardpoint is pretty good. So you look at sort of the overall map stats and you say, well, maybe if you can improve the control, you never know, you can grind out these series. I don't know how much to read into that considering their opposition, but again, they did beat Toronto, so I need to tip that as well. I think in general for this team, like they're just really pretty good on Fortress, really good on Mercado Hardpoint, but like, Hotel sort of hit and miss, Asilo sort of hit and miss. Their just map pool is very, very, very narrow. So I'm not really sure what to think of them on that front. Let's take a look at some individual stats as well for this team. First off, if we take a look at individual stats, we got to talk about Asim's number being a little bit low. I know he had a really good last series, but 0.86 in S&D, the 0.94 in Hardpoint, 0.83 in Control, not good enough. If Asim wants to be the all-star player, he needs to step up. The player that actually has been playing good, and keep in mind, they did make a role change here with him moving to an AR, is Nasty. They moved Paul to a sub. And Nasty's AR numbers are really good, averaging a 1 across all game modes. Whereas for Paul, a 0.87 in Control, a 0.83, and a 0.98 in Hardpoint. I think like Asim's numbers definitely need to go up. I think watching Paul on the map, he just at times doesn't look confident as a player. So I think if they're going to make a change next on this team, Paul might be the one to go. I also want to tip Matty, aka Scraps, playing particularly good for his Major 2 performance. The turnaround here is pretty good for Scraps, coming back off the long layover. He's doing his thing. So, the individual numbers are not bad. The slaying numbers are not bad. They didn't, I just don't know what to think of this London team. I guess theoretically they could come out, get an upset and make a run. The only problem is that they're going to have to play either Boston or Optic. Now, if it's Optic, I think it's chalked. If it's Boston and they're coming off a loss to Optic and they're having to run it back pretty much the next day, there might be an opportunity for London to get a victory and get a little bit of momentum. They would then have to play either New York, Toronto, or Florida in the next round. So I think for London, I could kind of see if it's Boston, them having a chance in that series potentially. So I think ceiling is top 8. I think floor is dead last. If it's Optic down there, they're chalked. So we'll see, man. I mean, if I had to pick one of these teams at the bottom side of the bracket to maybe make a run, London might be the one that I pick. I'm not really confident in any of the 4, to be honest, but London might be the one based on form that might find a little bit something when they go to land. So we will see if that is the case. So yeah, that is all of the CDL teams. It should be an exciting tournament. My next video will be a bracket prediction, so be on the lookout for that. As always, guys, let me know in the comments what you think. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more, and we'll see you guys on the next video.